Hello, friends of the Revival. Welcome back to episode 7. Perhaps that would be significant if 7 is significant to you. This one is on self love.
This is the podcast that they've been waiting for, number 007.
007.
Yes,
It,
007. This is the secret agent. We're going to expose the secret of self love versus selfishness. Yeah,
yeah,
there we
is
go.
it selfish? Is self love selfish? Well, 007 is here to tell you no. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day.
We- how about we expand on that just a little?
All right,
Uh,
Chuck, go ahead.
oh, thanks. So how do we? Maybe it's helpful to at the beginning to sort of frame it in terms of definitions, like what is self-love, what is selfish? Because like the word love is broad. Like for instance, in Greek, you've got like phileo, I think, eros, agape. You've got several different. I want to say there's like 4 or 5 different words that mean different things. But in our English culture, we use the word love, and it's covers everything from I love ice cream, I love skydiving, I love my wife, and
Yeah.
it's a very, very broad use. So for us today, what do you think would be the best way to describe each of those terms?
Oh, good grief. Well, I think that it is important. What we mean when we're talking about self-love is not necessarily about caring for our like ego or like the part of us that we usually identify with that's like kind of random or emotional and is caught up in our life circumstances. Although we do honor that part of us, but what we're talking about is like cultivating in our spirit a sense of well-being.
Okay.
And that is, I think, what we're coming at is self-love. It's not necessarily like get a pedicure, treat yourself to a latte, although yes and yes, or not, whatever. But we're talking about really like our relationship to ourselves and how we care for our emotional well-being and our physical well-being, and our spiritual well-being. It's like a holistic approach to being. So it's
Yeah,
more in the way that we go forward in our life than it is about the things that we are doing. So
it's good.
with that, we're not trying to create boundaries and rules about what self-care and self-love looks like, because we're not wanting to be like, it's this and not that. It truly is something that you have to tap into and know for
For yourself.
thyself,
Mm,
right?
mhm. So
Yeah.
we can't judge another person's journey. Hey, they're being selfish when they may not be. It might be the most unselfish thing, for instance, like in a bad marriage. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you got you got two people. They hate each other. They're married. They're duking it out all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
and and one of them leaves the other one, and and somebody could look at that and say, well, how selfish. I mean, she left him, or maybe she left him with the kids, and but it could be that in that scenario, that's the most loving thing that could have happened in that whole story. So
Right.
so we're not saying it's something that we can measure for other people. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that we have to learn how to cultivate within our own experience and learn for ourselves, what's selfish, what is self-love. For me, on the selfish side, I think of selfish is when I do something that harms, like it brings harm to another person
Mm-hmm.
rather than hurts them. So I might hurt somebody's feelings because I didn't do something they wanted me to do, but
Right.
I didn't harm them. so
Yeah.
so that kind of selfishness, that's how I think of selfishness, at
Yeah.
least in terms of my own experience.
Yeah, like not meeting other people's expectations or freeing yourself of obligation is not selfishness,
Right.
right? Yeah,
Right.
and it might hurt people's feelings or hurt relationships even, in like extreme circumstances, but um
And
right.
we're not responsible. None of us. One of the most important like aha moments I ever had was I am not responsible for the reactions and the emotional reactions of other people.
Hmm.
That's their own world that's going on inside there. Now that doesn't mean I need to like be hurtful or on purpose or do something that's harmful to them. But their reaction to my life, if
Hmm.
I'm in self-care, self-love, I'm doing what I feel like is best for me at that moment, is not my responsibility whether they're happy or sad about it.
Yeah.
And that's
So
very freeing.
it can be very freeing and it can be really gray and difficult too to tell the difference. And one of the reasons like I wanted to reach for this topic was for the mothers, was just because I know in my experience that I have heard it to be true that you should fill up your cup and you should always like you can't give what you don't have and all of that kinds of stuff. And so there was a lot of things that I've tried to do for myself in order to practice self-care over the years. And it's been an evolution. Here we go, a little side note. I do believe that like self-love is like a journey into a way of being, and so it will always evolve, which is another reason that we don't want to like put super tight boundaries on it, because
Right.
where I was with this topic 3 years ago is different now, and it'll be different then. And
Hmm.
so, we're not trying to like wrap this up as like an even concluded topic. It's just sort of something that's really interesting to discuss, maybe hopefully to bring clarity. So back to the mothers, like I know there's things that I would do for myself over the years in order to give myself a break or to give myself relief, because the circumstances felt so crazy or I would feel so stressed out. And those were good and helpful things. However, it's less about what we're doing and more about tuning in to our, again, into our inner well-being and like, how am I speaking to myself? How am I showing myself kindness? How am I like cultivating my own inner well-being so that when I show up in life, I am love,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And that's what I want to give to my kids. And so it's like to make a choice between doing something that could may or may not hurt them is confusing for a mom. It's like, well, should I leave this weekend on my girls' retreat or should I stay home and go to my daughter's dance competition because that would be very important to her? Oh my word, right? Like there's so much gray area in this topic, and I'm not even going to answer that question because I have no idea what would be the best thing in that scenario. But it's like I can feel the things that feel like they expand me, in order to sort of like embrace the journey and the task that I have at hand with raising with raising kids and like being a mom, and the things that sort of feel like, okay, I sacrifice myself in order to show up for you,
Mm.
right? Like that's how I do it a lot. Okay, I sacrifice this about me so I can show up for you, so I can do for you, so I can be here for you, so I can. And we talked about this, and it is true about like well, we put our own mask on first, but we want to do it for our kids first. I do this for you and everybody. When I can get everybody all situated and happy and thriving, then I do me. And I just want to say, no, like it's you have to do you first so that you can show up in this like fullness of love and bring that to the table for
Right.
your family. You want to bring your love to bring your love to your family, not just what you do for people.
So selfish would kind of be like you doing all that for yourself, but not ever caring about your kids, not ever, being there for them, being love present for them. But it was all about you and it stopped there. But self-love or self-care or self-compassion is more about you being in a place where you can have the capacity to care for others, to love others,
Yeah.
and to be there for others. And self-sacrifice, even self-sacrifice may not even really be that, it might not be coming from a place of love. It could be coming from a
Might
place
not
of
be
obligation.
noble.
Yeah.
Right,
It could be
right.
pure obligation. You could hate your life. You hate your kids, but you know you got to be there because it's what you were told to do, and you're
Hmm.
dying inside. Um,
Yeah,
and that's not healthy. And it doesn't benefit the children. It doesn't benefit the spouse. It doesn't benefit anybody, including ourselves, when we're not caring for ourselves
yeah.
in our life in different situations. And you mentioned, the mask. It's the idea. We mentioned it on another episode. I'm not sure, but it's the idea on the plane ride that the mask for the mom and the child come down. They say when it comes down, that the mom has to put hers on first, and then the
Hmm.
child's, because without that, she won't have the ability to be able to help someone who's helpless. So
Hmm.
there's a healthy place of self-care, self tuning in to our best, our well-being, so that we are capable of being there for other people. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so a lot of, a lot of the ways that nobody really wants to be selfish, because selfish is, it's a lose for you, for the other people involved, like it's a lose. And so when you're aiming to hit win-wins in your life, I think that when you're in that like high sacrificing mode where you're like just constantly giving and pouring out for others, the fear is that if you don't do that, you will be selfish. So it's almost like selfishness is on the opposite end of the spectrum as sacrifice rather than self-love.
Mm.
Because if you're if you're not loving yourself, you're not, the opposite of that is not being selfish. It's usually being like, what's the opposite of self-love, Chuck?
Not selfish. It's self-destructive.
Exactly.
Self-destructive. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's so true. So true.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And the other context I think of self-love, and I mean, I see self-love again, it's not selfish. I see it as like this value for your highest well-being.
mhm.
For me to love you as a person means I value your highest well-being. So for like with our kids, having them, we love them, but to have
Mhm.
them do something doesn't mean that they're being we're being unloving to them because we made them clean up their room, and we're not
Right.
being selfish. Um, but one of the things that stood out to me over the years when I was preaching was I would preach this, I preached on the love of God all the time. It was probably
Mhm.
my number one topic, focus. But it was like I had to keep preaching the same message in 100 different ways, because they would feel love, they'd have an amazing experience, and then they would leave and they'd be gone by Monday. And it took me a
Mhm.
long time to figure out why that was. I thought, well, it's just they don't have faith, and then I realized I'm doing the same thing that they that they were doing. So I
Yeah.
had to preach myself back up the next Sunday. And it was really because it was a lack of self-love. Like we create like this Teflon heart is what I call it, where these messages of love outside of us don't stick, simply because we aren't treating ourselves with respect. We're loving ourselves with compassion, and we're not loving ourselves with patience. Man,
Mhm.
I mean, we're patient with ourselves. That to
Yeah.
me, that's not selfish. That's honoring. It's healthy. It's good. It's holistic. And
Mhm.
then when somebody says something affirming, they love you, they're proud of you, whatever, that's a bonus. You're like, yeah,
Mhm.
thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that you recognize that. But it's not something I'm needy from another person, where I'm codependent on them. I need their love because I haven't been willing to love myself that way. So
Yeah.
self-love, I think, is real important to break some cycles of codependency and to get in a healthy place emotionally for our lives.
Yeah. And not needing the sensation of self-love to even come through different kinds of experiences necessarily. Like, for instance, I it's hard to describe and go in depth because I really don't want to say it's not that, but like I know that I used to live 4 minutes from Target. And so that was my like escape route, right? If I ever needed a break from the kids or whatever, and Dalen would come home, like I would get myself a coffee and I would browse through Target. And I love that practice. Do not hear me say, don't go to Target and get a latte and browse the clearance aisle. Please do that. But also, and in my experience, if you're like me, over so many years, I was like, it's like nice in the moment, but when I come home about 10 minutes later, it's like I didn't even have a break at all. Like it's all just right back in there because yeah, I wasn't being patient with myself and I was condemning myself, especially because I would get back and I would think like you're supposed to be refreshed. You're still acting like an asshole to your family. Like what good did that do you? And it almost in a way like mentally or internally like made it worse because I felt like I had what I needed and I should be able to now like act all loving and refreshed. I
So,
just had this great opportunity.
so maybe the most loving thing you did was leave to go to Target. So it might have been a very loving thing.
Was loving for them. That was how I love. It wasn't loving for me. No, it was. No, it
No, I'm
is. See, it
teasing.
is good. It's good to do, but it's like when you keep doing things for yourself in order to catch a break or to fill your cup up, but you constantly feel like you spill it right back out,
Mm,
then you're focusing on what you're doing for yourself.
right.
And what we're trying to say is self-love is valuing your highest and your best internal well-being, which means that you're going to have to pay attention to how you're feeling. You're going to have to tell yourself the truth about that, and you're going to have to like listen. You have to listen to what you're saying to yourself.
Yeah.
About like for instance, I mean, it was totally normal and unnoticeable how I would get down on myself for not being able to sort of hold on to these times of refreshing and bring them into my week or the rest of my day. Just like what you're saying, it's like I would preach to myself, oh, I got a break. I catch my breath. I had a coffee. Everything's supposed to be great. And then I would go right back into my circumstance and feel the same that I did before I left. And that was so difficult for me because I was just making it was like a yucky vortex, because then you just make yourself feel worse because
Yeah.
you should
Yeah.
feel better and you
But
don't.
but part of that self-love then is when we are telling ourselves that it's not our performance, but it's
Right.
that self-talk for sure. When we're telling ourselves that I mean that to not do that in love, or if we can, let me say it this way, if we can catch ourselves in that self-talk and that negative spiral we put ourselves into, because it's really a habit. It's really what it is.
Yeah.
And it's a
Hmm.
habit for a lot of us. And for everybody who's watching, I know it's a habit for you. It's it's a habit for a lot of people. But if
Hmm.
you can catch it and you start noticing it, then
Hmm.
all of a sudden it's like those are the moments you treat yourself with respect and love and honor. And we treat ourselves a lot of times in ways that we would never treat our own children or our
Hmm.
own spouse, or somebody calls on the phone and we're like, hi, we go from
Right.
to hi. Why don't we just like treat ourselves like that to begin with? It's because partly because we've just never learned to do that. We
Well,
never practice self-love. You can go on vacation and
hmm.
do something different, but
Hmm.
we live in Panama City Beach, Florida. There's like 11 million visitors here a year. It's this
Oh, wow.
gigantic influx of people that come in, but people are fighting and they're yelling at each other, and they're they're on vacation, and the kids and the mom and everybody's in the hair. It's like going to church on Sunday morning. And that the rest, the doing
Mm-hmm.
something by itself wasn't the solution.
Right.
They needed a vacation of all the stuff that's going on in here.
Exactly. So how do you do that? How do you get into, yeah. One of the things I realized, like, there's everybody knows not to be, not everybody, but a lot of it's pretty common, like, that we shouldn't talk negatively to ourselves,
Right.
in spiritual circles and stuff like that. And I was always like, oh yeah, 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 I don't do that. But what I did realize once I started listening and, like, kind of just being more of an observer to what I'm thinking or how I'm feeling, I realized that I don't necessarily say rude things, but my tone is so condescending,
Mm,
towards myself. It's kind of like
mm.
eye roll, give me a break, Amelia, or really, kind of that kinds of stuff that makes me feel like, oh, I know I just got back from Target. I shouldn't be frustrated or whatever, and I wouldn't
I would
necessarily like
definitely be frustrated going to Target. That would not be my safe place.
Oh, let me tell you, I live in the mountains now. Target is not my form of therapy. I'm like, if I can stay out of the store, that's power to me. I do not like doing that anymore. This was back in the day before
Yeah,
before
back
I
in the
got
old
really
days.
before I was into nature. But
Uh,
yeah, so just the internal listening, um to and observing to, like, how you are approaching yourself when you come to, like, crossroads or junctures or circumstances that are challenging. um Also, and in addition to going inward, I think that self-care can sometimes be going outward too, like
mm,
coming out of your head, out
uh,
of all of the things, and, like, doing something for someone, like calling in a friend to encourage them, or some way that you can, like, water outside of you. And as a mom, it's like, oh, that's bad advice because that's all we do, but it's not true. Like, to come out of your internal conflict and to pour out service in another area can often be an act of self-love. And I've been doing this in a way this week. I was telling you, it's like, a lot of times I lean into self-love through, like, yoga and meditation and going on walks and solitude. But then my kids, I would do that, and then my kids would come home from school, and I'd find myself, like, immediately frustrated because my house is a disaster and I haven't set anything out for dinner. And so this week my self-care has been, when the kids are gone, it's like getting my space right and, like, getting some of the things off of my list,
mm,
because my propensity is to just, like, do yoga and, journal and meditate and all that kinds of stuff. But oftentimes it can be getting out of all of the internal overthinking and trying to fix your life, and talking, or thinking through all these problems that you're having, and just, like, putting your hand to the plow and, like, doing the thing that you have before you to get yourself moving forward and up out of, like, a stuck place can be
yeah,
self-love as well.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
I think that that self-love is not selfish.
It's not. It's
It's
just
not.
it's just not. Yeah, and it's the we really wanted to keep this podcast at 30 minutes to kind of force ourselves to be concise. But this topic is so rich, and I mean, I've been thinking on it for at least a month. We've been talking about doing this, and the more I thought about it and I talked to people, like, what are your thoughts about self-love being selfish? And I got as many answers as people I talked to. So I know that this kind of, like, quandary, or this boundary, or this different, like, how to differentiate between, caring for self but not being, like, a selfish person. I know that that's out there for people, and so we'll just have to call this kind of like part one
Yeah, I
because it
do.
is growing and evolving.
Yeah, I have one more thought that um, before we depart,
Hmm.
because if I either don't write it down or say it, it won't exist anymore. It'll disappear out of my
I
out
know
of my
that
world.
feeling.
Um, if we, and for those who do, if we believe that we're all one, that there's some kind of spiritual connection between all humanity, one human family. There's some spiritual connection that's there, however you want to define it. Then when I take care of myself, or I value myself, or I'm seeking after my best well-being, it's not just about me, because it lifts everybody. There's an effect, I think, that it has on the whole. It lifts us all together. When I am about taking care of myself, then it lifts other people up as well. So
That's like, amen, Pastor Chuck. That's it. Like that's why it's not selfish, is because it does. That's exactly true. That's exactly right. And is that it's so when you show up and you practice self-care and self-love, and then you cultivate that love in your being, then it's true transformation. It's not that you love your family better, like you do love for them
right,
better. You just are love. That's just what
yeah.
you constantly bring. It's just who you are. It's not something you do or don't do. And sometimes, yeah,
So that
so
state of
exactly.
being thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So, and well, anyways, okay.
So we've
I'm
got some
like,
more
oh,
episodes. We've got some more episodes coming up on that. We'll hit that at some other angles. I'm sure it's a great topic, because, and we all get confused about it, and we can overanalyze it too,
mm-hmm.
internally, and like, am I really being loving? Am I being selfish? Am I being loving, being selfish? Rather than just trying to have compassion on yourself, let that overflow into other people, and it and it's good and healthy. Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple things that we have coming up that we're working on is an episode about setting yourself up right for this new year that's around the
Yeah.
corner, 2020. And I'm working on a little something that I haven't even talked to Chuck about yet, about judging, being judgmental, judging others, judging yourself, something along those lines. So we have things that are constantly brewing
That
for
would
us on
not
the
be
Revival.
self-love.
That would not be self-love. We have things constantly brewing on the Revival, and of course, we're always so excited and happy to hear from our listeners. Like, what are you thinking about? Like, what are some things that you're looking at, going, I don't really get how this works or fits together or flows with my life, because um, I'm sure we've thought about it. I think about everything, and I know you do too. So, you have
And
things that you're working
I
on.
do. I've got a 30-day group coaching program that I'm putting the finishing touches on. Don't want to give it all away yet. I've got a video coming out in the next couple of days, hopefully tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it's called You Are the Path, and it's really about helping people who are in that place where, they're asking questions, they're at a spiritual crossroad, they're and now maybe they're asking questions about the big questions, like, who am I, who is God, why am I here? And when they
Mm-hmm.
started asking them, everybody freaked out, because they were asking the questions and it was causing drama, and now they're emotionally challenged, going through challenges through all this. It's really how to navigate through that journey when they're
Mm-hmm.
making that major transition in their belief system, and how you are the path. So the answer really is internal. No matter what belief system a person chooses, no matter where they go or how the road turns, all the answers really are going to come from within themselves. And so I'm going to kind of coach people on how to get rooted and secure in that, so they're not feeling so fearful. So it's going to be really good.
Oh my gosh, it's gonna be so good. I can't believe it. It's like one of those moments I had, when I had little babies and I was fed used baby. I did not make my own baby food, so don't judge. But you have those like little tedious jars that you feed them out
Yeah.
of, and then a couple years later, these like squishy pouches come on the scene where it's like baby food just goes shoop, like straight into their mouth, and I'm like, where was that when I was raising kids? And I feel like that about your coaching program. I'm like, where was that when I was walking through it? Oh my
I
word.
understand.
Oh,
I
I did.
understand,
Yeah. And
because
that,
I know, for myself, I didn't know how to, had to learn the hard way. I just want to be able to help people to not have to go through the hard way, you
Right,
know,
right.
and
Yeah, well, everybody's path is unique, and it's like if you can so you already have a lot going on because you're going to have to go yourself.
mm,
Period. It's like
right,
birth. It's like the birthing something new, no matter how much support or people that you have around you, you ultimately are the one who's going to bring that baby into the world. You're the one that's
yeah,
going to feel the pain and the joy of having that accomplishment. But when you have somebody like Chuck who can bring a flashlight on your path and say, okay, here's a few things that you can expect. You're doing great. You're getting there. It's okay if you're feeling a little dark, if you're feeling a little hurt, if you're feeling super excited and
anger,
elated.
yeah,
Yeah, it's just
yeah.
so stinking helpful. So this is amazing. I'm really, really excited about your coaching program.
Thank you. I'm excited about it too. So keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
Keep an eye out, everybody. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks,
All
Chuck. It
right. Thanks,
was
Amelia. You're
fun.
awesome.
Yeah.
Have
You
a good
too.
day.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye
Bye.
bye.